Hi, this is my second video now. Excuse my distraction. He thinks he is a cushion. So I had left off last time discussing that on the 24th of December I had been taken into hospital in an ambulance. So I didn't really get much warning on what was going to happen on the 24th. Yes, from being out of hospital the first time until the 23rd or 24th, definitely things had progressed. My memory, well, not memories so much as word finding or working out how to do things, had definitely been getting worse. And I had been in touch with the doctor from the hospital, who was from the stroke clinic. I think she called me on the 21st, and I had told her that things were getting worse, and I was very frustrated. She had organised the MRI scan. She had said that had come back and it definitely hadn't been a stroke, and that her wording was, I was a very sick lady, and I didn't really know what that meant. And I was going to go to the ophthalmologist on the 24th just to check things there, and she was going to arrange some more testing. That's all I knew. But from going to just losing your vision to then losing words to then not being able to move your arms or turn on a tap, and as I said before, it's like I knew how to hold a glass, I knew how to put water into the glass, but my brain couldn't tell my arms how to fulfill that. So all I could do was stare at the glass. So when this happened on the 24th, we were not expecting grand mal or tonic-clonics, whichever you prefer to call them, convulsive seizures. We were not expecting that. In the hospital, I did come to, as I said, about 12 o'clock. I saw the word triage, so I knew I was in the hospital. I think Richard must have arrived at that time because I remember hearing his voice or seeing him. And I went back to sleep, whichever we want to call it, and then woke up in another room. I was asking Richard about all the insects on the ceiling and climbing up the wall. I remember telling him I saw ants. I don't remember discussing the spiders with him, but yeah, apparently I've been seeing spiders as well. There was no insects in any room. It was as clinical a room as you can imagine inside a hospital. I then remember waking up again. Somebody was asking me to sign some forms because I had to get another CTA and another MRI with contrast. So they wanted me to sign something saying that contrast, which is radiation, you could die of having too much of it, or you could have complications. I don't know whether I signed it or not. I could barely even focus, quite honestly. Eventually I did wake up in the room where I'd be spending the next day. I didn't really know what was going on. I was on steroids for possible meningitis. I was on a whole bunch of antibiotics for various infections they thought that I could have. I do remember them telling me that when you're on steroids, it can put your blood glucose up high, so they had to start me on insulin for that. They did tell me I would come off insulin, but I might have to go on some sort of oral diabetes medication. I very clearly remember that. This information didn't seem to get passed on to the ward where I went the next day, and we'll probably touch on that in the next story. And then over the next few hours, Richard eventually did leave. To be quite honest, I barely knew he was there, but I did know he was going and he was coming back the next morning. And it was not a very comfortable night. The nurses were great in the emergency ward. They cleaned me, they took care of me, they answered all the beeps of all the different machines I was on. At this stage, I didn't really know a lot of what was going on. I assumed Richard knew, or Richard had been told. It turns out they hadn't really been communicating with him. So at this stage, we don't know what's happened. We don't know what's happening. We're again told it's not a stroke. They're suspecting encephalitis or meningitis or various things like West Nile disease came up, a whole load of other things. The next day I got some more testing done, and eventually I was taken upstairs to a ward. Now, bearing in mind I am now in hospital in the middle of the Omicron wave of COVID, so short-staffed, and well, to be quite honest, it was a bit of a shit show. However, they do the best that they can, and COVID is one of these things that, yes, it's an excuse why there was less care in the hospital, But for me personally, it's not an excuse to what happened afterwards. But that's just my opinion. Anyhow, back on track. I go to the ward. Nobody's coming to clean me. Nobody's explaining anything. I had a couple of accidents, to be quite honest with you. I went and got my own nightgown. I get shouted at for taking nightgowns. I got yelled at for getting clean sheets. There was a bit of yelling in the hospital. I don't really know what the issue was. But anyway, that's just how it's been left with me. I don't feel very happy about that. But that's another story for another day. So after a couple of hours, the doctor that had dealt with me, that's from the stroke clinic, came in to say she had been trying to reach me. She wondered why I hadn't been answering the call and why I hadn't gone to the ophthalmologist. And then she saw my name when she was down in Emerge. So she came up to see me and I said, what's going on? I don't understand. Have I had a stroke? And she said, no, I think you have brain cancer. And it was as cut and dried as that. It really was just that simple. That's what she said. Half an hour later, the other doctor I dealt with the week before that had admitted me to the hospital, that had told me I had a stroke, came in and said, I see you're back in. I told you it was a stroke. Sometimes you have convulsions after strokes or seizures. And I said, the other doctor just came in half an hour ago to tell me I didn't have a stroke. What do you mean? Well, the other doctor just came in to tell me she thinks I have brain cancer. And he went off, hands in the air, in a tangent. Why do people do these things? It's a stroke. It's not brain cancer. And off he trotted. Never saw him again. Not once. Although he was meant to be my doctor, I never saw him again. Now, as it turned out, I didn't have any strokes. There was no strokes. There was no strokes actually showed in the CT or in the MRI for him to even think I had a stroke. I know this now. We're now into May. But the problem is, because he thought I had a stroke, he had me on blood thinners. And this will make a bit more sense later on in my stories. My point being, I actually don't know what my point is anymore. So it might be time to finish this one today. And I will return maybe in another few days. Thank you for listening.